morning and welcome back. This is Daybreak and thank you for staying with us. Let's now focus on the proceedings before the National Dialogue Committee at the Bomas of Kenya, chaired by Senior Counsel Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka and the National Assembly Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah, and the proposals presented by different stakeholders, including the Law Society of Kenya with its president here, and also the Center for Multi-Party Democracy that is represented this morning here on the broadcast by Franklin Mukwanja. And I come to you first before we get the accounts of the politicians, Eric, and you vehemently are opposed, for example, to the creation, one of the major proposals of the official opposition leader's office. And what is the reason? What are the justifications? Why are you opposed to that?
Basically, we don't see that position fitting within the architectural structure of the Constitution. And it will mean that we need to overhaul the entire Constitution to achieve the creation of that office. When you take into consideration the fact that this committee has been set up to achieve cohesion, the campaigns that would be associated with a referendum to establish this office is one that is likely to cause even more division. And when you look at it, we are going through a very difficult situation, high cost of living, and because of all those considerations, I think that we have to live with the current structure as we have, and just ensure that we implement our Constitution a little bit much more faithfully. Once we do that, we should be able to realize the fruits of the new Constitution that we have. It's not so new now. So that's the real reason why we are opposed to it. Our analysis is that we are in some sort of tension as a country, not because we have a bad Constitution, but because we do not implement it faithfully.
Okay. Is that largely then a responsibility on the part and failure by those who ought to be implementing the Constitution 13 years since we had promulgated it?
Yes, yes, indeed. It's largely a failure on mostly the executive, largely a failure on the part of Parliament, and so that we should be looking inwards. The two institutions should really be looking at themselves and saying, can we do this? Can we take our oaths much more seriously? And ensure that we heal this country, because if you remember, the experiences that we went through in prior to enacting the Constitution are what informed most of those provisions. People felt there was a bloated cabinet. They said, no, we want to limit the number of cabinet positions to this much. That there was too much power within the executive. They said, no, we want to spread this power and move it from the center to the devolved units. So those were the experiences of the country. If you look at when you set up the office of the Inspector General of Police, the office of the DPP, and the manner and the language that is used in the Constitution is to ensure that we never go back to those days when the country was ruled by, fiat and disregard to good governance. If you look at Article 10 in terms of what it says to be our national values and principles, patriotism and all that. So the structure of the Constitution looked at as a whole appears designed to take us, never to take us back to those years and to take us into a new promise. But why haven't we realized that promise? We haven't realized that promise because of selfish political reasons, because of people trying to claw back on those provisions of the Constitution and attempting to take us back to a majoritarian leadership where the head of the executive then becomes, above the constitution.
Okay.
And that's the challenge we face as a country, in our view, currently.
We'll talk about what appears to be a largely lacking desire to implement, an appetite to implement the Constitution 2010. Franklin, talk to me about the position of CMD on that major aspect which stands out for many stakeholders, that is the official opposition leader's office.
In as much as my stakeholders, the political parties, because CMD is a member organization of political parties, largely favor the creation of these two positions, not just the official leader of opposition, but as well as bringing in on board the prime cabinet secretary position. Yeah. We have spoken to the committee and asked very pertinent questions. One is, in what system will this fit? Do you want to swing to parliamentary, or do you want to swing to hybrid? And we have also asked whether the country is in a state of mind, so to speak, for a constitutional overhaul, because then you cannot be able to introduce these positions, as the LSK president puts it, without an overhaul of the constitution. We largely favor piecemeal amendment and incremental reform than a swing in terms of a constitutional overhaul. And therefore, we are calling out for much more legal surgery. There's a different school of thought within the political corridors that are functioning, that think there could be a window to introduce those positions without necessarily having a constitutional overhaul. So that conversation has to go on. But our position number one is that we favor incremental reform as opposed to a constitutional overhaul. We do not think that we are in a good frame of mind as a country to do that. Number two, those incremental reforms, we must prioritize one, the two-thirds gender principle, that it's actually possible to do that now without attacking the basic structure. And that is one of the proposals we have put across, is to import Article 177B that has sorted out the county assemblies in terms of gender parity to the Senate in Article 98. And you will see with the arithmetics, you will just need 2 more nominees to reach the not more than two-thirds gender threshold. And then import the same to Article 97 to ensure that Parliament is also, National Assembly is also realizing that. And going further, because our political parties and our political party leaders have lacked the discipline, make sure that the vulnerable groups, the young people, the persons with disability, the minority groups are ring-fenced, so that we do not have, at least, for instance, in Parliament, where, with a lot of due respect, in previous Parliament, we had minor commander as a worker. And we have a member of parliament, a former member of parliament today, sitting as a worker. And we do not want those loopholes used to deny the special interest groups the opportunities. The second issue is socioeconomic rights. We want a stronger focus on Article 43. Kenyans are largely struggling. One of the proposals we have put across is that we have to introduce the aspects of Article 43 to Article 132 on the state of the nation addressed by the president. We do not just want the president to apprise us on national values and our obligations to international obligations, but also what is his government doing to ensure that Kenyans' socio-economic and cultural rights are progressively realized. And finally, the issue of party discipline. We strongly believe that Section 14(2) of the Political Parties Act has been used to water down Article 103. And if we are to strengthen our multi-party democracy, then we have to strengthen our individual political parties, ensuring that there is a good level of party discipline. And therefore, the good or bad manners of my brother, Honorable Didmas Barasa, and his loyalty to his party of his choice must be his responsibility to ensure that if you start swinging across and being disloyal, I mean, don't swindle the voters. Go back and seek a fresh mandate.
Okay, we will talk more detailed about. We'll detail more about some of the issues that you have highlighted, including what you said should not be a total overhaul, which then means getting back and getting the mandate of the people, which is largely a referendum. Honorable Didmas Barasa, talk to me about all these proposals and some of the issues outlined generally by the National Dialogue Committee as areas of focus. And can they address the deep-lying problems which are deep-rooted in this country?
First, I will restrict myself to some of the issues that I'm supporting. You know, very many people are appearing before this dialogue committee with their own things, the way they want the country to be governed. But most importantly, I want just to bring it to the attention of LSK President that it is not just the government that has a duty of developing the country. The opposition have a bigger role, you know, in terms of fighting corruption, strengthening our parliamentary watchdog committee, and the office of the official leader of opposition is very important. It is not nothing new at all. It's just changing the name of the current leader of minority in the National Assembly to be the official leader for the opposition, where the government of the Republic of Kenya will provide that leader with an office and with the resources to be able to oversight the government. You know, government reflects our society. The same way we have rock advocates in LSK, the same way we have rock government officers, the same way we have corrupt Kenyans, we may have elements of corrupt people who have been given the responsibility in government. So by strengthening, you know, the office of the leader of opposition and anchoring it in the constitution, I think that is a good thing to do. One person may argue that Kenyans are struggling with the high cost of living and we require the money. Another person will argue and say that there are a lot of the money that we are collecting as government, some of it is being pilfered, getting lost, is being embezzled, and the strengthening the office of the leader of opposition with these shadow ministers, they are able to checkmate the government, they are able to put the government on toes. Maybe we will save too much money that we are currently losing. The second thing which is very important is that the dialogue committee is receiving views from Kenyans and from different interested groups, and I would have expected the LSK president, if he has a problem with the formula, with the roadmap that Kenya is currently undertaking to review our constitution, but saying that it doesn't fit in the structure of our government, I don't think that one makes sense, because we are at liberty to change our constitution, including the two-thirds gender. We have to change our constitution. So if we will be forced to do so, to change our constitution, then we can be able to do so without any hindrance. But there is one danger which I think we should discuss it. Is Kenya ready to hold a referendum? My answer is no. So that was another bottleneck.
Thank you.
Because you know, we have we may have certain people who are pushing this dialogue committee to conclude her business so that we can have a referendum which maybe the opposition can use it to springboard to 2027 elections. And whether it will go through or not, it can be a vote of no confidence against our government.
Talking about what you have termed as the strengthening of the office of the official opposition leader, which the current dispensation does not project. I mean, then what difference in terms of outcome will, say, for example, the creation of that office have than at the moment that Opiyo Wandayi, who is the leader of the minority party, is not effectively undertaking?
What Opiyo Wandayi is doing now, he is not properly accountable in that position as the leader of official opposition. But if Kenyans will create an office of the official leader of the opposition, then it will mean that the holder of that office will be fully accountable, because he will have deliverables to deliver. Because once you are drawing your money and the resources from exchequer, you must have a particular framework under which you will be able to operate, that will be clear, and the roles will be very clear, and that whatever will come out of that office, it will be very official, and the government must, agencies will have to implement. But we speak today, even if Opio and I will go to the news and say he has seen such and such a thing, you know, it will just be seen by wearing a political lens to be just the normal political noises that members of the opposition make.
Oh, well, it is still, he or she will be viewed from political lenses. That's undoubtedly the domain of fundamental how politics is practiced globally. I'll come to you, Honorable Maungu. When you say in terms of budgeting, I mean, Honorable Wandai has an office in Parliament. He draws money from the Exchequer as a member of Parliament and also the leader of the minority party. The opposition is accountable because the Kenyan people expect them to hold the government in account in terms of checking over the excesses of the administration of the day. I mean, all these three aspects still undertaken by Opio Wandai. I mean, how convincing is it? Give me a convincing reason at the Kenyan people as to why we should have the official opposition leader's office that at the moment those roles aren't undertaken by Opio Wandai or the leader of the minority party.
The members of Parliament from the minority parties, including Honorable Dick Maungu, he is not put to account because of the position he holds in the opposition. But he's always put to account because of the position he holds as a member of Parliament for Rwanda, as a member of Parliament representing his particular constituency. But by the time you create an official leader for the opposition, and the Kenyans will be aware that so-and-so is the official leader of the opposition, then he will be put to account on that particular aspect of him being the official leader of the opposition. The office of Opio Wandai is understaffed. He doesn't have the very many employees that will be able to assist him in terms of getting the requisite information from ministries, from government institutions, so that he can be able to go through them. And as a matter of fact, if Opio Wandai wants to get documents from various ministries, he has got maybe to go through the floor of Parliament, either by requesting Mr. Speaker, through the floor of Parliament, through the request of statement. But if you have the official leader for the opposition, that an office that is known, is kitted, is established in the Constitution, then that particular office, it doesn't require the approval of Mr. Speaker to be able to get the very important documents from ministries and state departments. But if we speak today, getting documents, even though it's provided by law that you can acquire any public document.
It's the right to information.
A right to information, but you cannot go to Treasury and say you want to get the very many individual documents, unless you go through the Parliament or you go to...
Okay, just also on a factual basis, PIC, the Public Investment Committee and Public Accounts Committee are a reserve of the opposition, remember? So therefore, these are two critical committees of Parliament and who hold the crucial documentation.
I think the problem we are having here is one of context. So let me say this, and I know Dismas knows this. There is no opposition in the current constitutional architecture. So let's get that first.
Correct.
There is either majority
or minority.
How do you get the majority? The team that has the party or the coalition that has the highest number of MPs in Parliament, they become the majority. Is it possible that the leader of the majority can come from the coalition that has not produced a president? It is possible. So in that situation, then, who becomes the opposition? Right. The president and his coalition is in the minority. The party that has lost the presidency is in the majority in Parliament. If we are to take it in context, then the president party would be in opposition. So that is what we need to understand in terms of the structure that we have adopted, which is a purely American structure, where you have majority and minority. In the UK, which is a parliamentary system, then you have the ruling party and you have the opposition. And I think once we get that in place, then you begin to ask yourselves, what happens then when it is the president's party that is in opposition? Do you form the president? And then you also give them the leader of official opposition.
Okay.
Yeah, it will become extremely problematic. So once we take that into context, the next question would be, then this office of official leader of opposition, how does someone occupy it? Is it a sitting member of parliament? Is it a senator? Is it a governor? Or is it just an individual member then who is elevated to sit in that office?
Thank you.
And that's why I was saying that within our current constitutional structure,
it isn't provided for.
You cannot even have it.
Okay.
So you must overhaul.
Yeah.
Well, can I talk about some of these?
Okay, just hang on, Honorable Frank. I'll come to you. Yes, Honorable Maungu.
Thank you so much. Well, when I must first of all confirm that I'm a member of the Azimio and therefore minority in the House and not opposition, as Didmas was putting it. But first things first, it is important to note the results. I mean, how did we arrive at the dialogue committee? We did arrive at the dialogue committee because of the challenges we faced as a nation. And Azimio went to this committee with 4 things in mind. One was the cost of living, which to us remains very critical and very important to date. Because Kenyans are suffering, and we cannot bury our heads in the sand that things are going good. So our primary purpose in that dialogue committee was to ensure that the government brings down the cost of living so that Mwananchi can be able to survive and cater for his basic needs. Number 2 was about IEBC reforms. We're all aware that we have issues to do with IEBC. Even as we stand right now, we don't have commissioners at the IEBC. So to us, that was a very, very important concept that the dialogue committee was supposed to give us a framework through which we can see what reforms we can have with regard to IEBC. Because coming every other election, we always have critical and serious issues, including the August elections of last year. And therefore, to us, IEBC reforms are very, very important. Number 3 was about inclusivity. This country, we have close to more than 45 different groupings. And we are saying that we need inclusivity in this government, inclusivity in the country, inclusivity in the public service, and in all sectors of our country. And therefore, when we did approach the dialogue committee, we went there with the 3rd item being inclusivity, that we need to see the face of Kenya in whatever happens in this country. You know, for example, as we speak right now, you can be sure that the appointments in government are skewed. Talk about the cabinet secretaries, talk about the principal secretaries. It is wrong when an entire community, an entire region is totally left out of government, yet you are a taxpayer in this country like any other person. So you are saying that we need to see the face of Kenya, let the 45 different groupings be well reflected in any given appointment. Yesterday, we had the cabinet secretary for Treasury, and he came to Parliament to answer questions with regard to recent recruitment of the KRA assistants. And it was shocking to know that 2 regions were able to produce more than 700 of the 1,000 people that were actually employed. Now, that does not speak to inclusivity. And therefore, when we did go to this table, we went with the mind that we needed to see every Kenyan has a right to be employed, every Kenyan has a right to be on that table. Lastly was the issue of the IEBC, I mean not IEBC, but the servers. We still demand and continue talking about we need to have the servers opened. Elections were done, and I want to imagine that accountability will always come with transparency and accountability. Now, when you talk about the servers, we find that elections were done. We still believe that the servers were interfered with. What is so difficult in having the servers opened? Let us see the logs and how these votes came in and how they were accounted for. Those are the 4 critical things that we, as members of Azimio, went to on the negotiation table. Now, coming to the leader of opposition, right now in Parliament, we are ably represented by none other than Opiyo Wandayi, who is the leader of minority in the House. Opiyo is able to execute his role pretty well, and we as members of the minority are able to take the government to book by asking the government to be accountable. I have the floor. I can do that on the floor of the House. Right. I can speak that in public because that is why I was elected as a leader, to speak the truth to government as it is. Therefore, I may not need a big office, that of official position, but I can take the government to account whichever position I am in. And therefore, it is the president who actually wrote a letter to the Speaker seeking amendment of the constitution to have an introduction of the official leader of opposition. Okay. But sadly, it is, sometimes politics, Didymus has alluded to the fact that we are noisemakers. We are not noisemakers per se, but we want to bring clarity to issues of politics in this country. Before the new, it's no longer new, as my good friend is saying, the Constitution of Kenya 2010 did abolish the opposition leader. And we had a very big office for that matter. But I've heard the president saying that we need to have an office, have carpets, have whatever, so that this guy can be making noise in the morning, making noise in the afternoon, and making noise in the evening. We are not about making noise. We are about representing our people and holding the account and the government to account.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Franklin, as you had a point, please.
Yeah. So I just wanted to point out that when we're looking at the issue of context, we should appreciate where you're also coming from. How did we arrive at the presidential system? In my view, it was a compromise. But we adopted a system sophisticated enough without our maturity. And having a presidential system that is raiding in nature, and then we have this confusion. So it is quite difficult to have a scenario where the LSK president is saying that a president is going to come from a minority coalition. If you remember the results of the 2022 general elections, Kenya Kwanza coalition had fewer numbers if the coalition's arrangements were to be respected. But soon after, we had people moving, because that is the nature of a presidential system, is very much raiding in nature. And without the necessary political discipline, then we are unlikely to find ourselves in those scenarios. The question as to whether we can treat that, I reckon it can be looked at. We can actually be able to prescribe that the candidate with the second greatest number of votes
in the presidential election.
In the presidential election. So then you are looking at, the checkmate of the president and not necessarily the number of elected positions, because the system that we have is that you are unlikely to have a president who's going to agree to leading a minority on the floor of the House. And those are the things that we have to look at. The question and the issue that we have to look at, is there a different legal view to what LSK is profiling? And that is what the country should deliberate on. Okay. If we can be able to introduce and build into the current arrangement the position of official leader of opposition, and if levels of accountability will be much raised with the involvement of a candidate who has, a good number of votes and not relying on their protege on the floor of the House, will do us a good service. I think we have to look into it. But if it is overhauling the Constitution to achieve it, I do not think we're in a good place to do that right now.
Which will be, of course, the expected outcome, because what Mr. Deuri pointed out is that we can't have, as you have mentioned, a dilution of the current system. It's either a parliamentary system or a presidential system or a hybrid system. But you mentioned a president who wouldn't agree to have or to come from the minority side, though under a different dispensation. Kibaki had the presidency, but ODM had the majority in parliament in 2007. Then if these proposals are adopted, it then means that the Kenyans or the Kenyan people would give their mandate as to the referendum process, because you are altering the structure of government. And you mentioned that the runners-up in the presidential election ought to be present. Is it about the individual? Is it about the personality? What if in the next election, maybe, and we change this course, that the presidential runners-up might not be interested in the position?
It's not about the personality, because people are not there permanently. They will not hold these positions of runners-up or in perpetuity. It is about looking at how do we bring the views of the other side strongly into the discussion of the country. Are we losing something, and what is it we are losing by these leaders staying outside of the House? And where can they be situated? Can they be put in the National Assembly? Because you're looking at the configuration of the Senate, it is a devolution house, and you do not necessarily want to interfere with that. But large business of running the national government is domiciled in the National Assembly. So it could be a possible conversation of having this candidate with the second greatest number of votes at the presidential level joining National Assembly and be able to do his work from there. And and whip their troops. And with proper configuration, make sure that there is less of raiding, you know, of the opposition, of the minority parties, to be able to have a super majority so that they run their business. In some way, if we can be able to improve our governance to that extent, then we can be able to have a conversation to the extent that we approach it incrementally, not bringing in a referendum in between elections. I think we'll be running into strong headwinds if we go that direction.
Incrementally, then what's that formula, for example, in terms of...
The question I'm putting across is that, is there an alternative view, a different school of thought from what LSK is profiling? If a legal surgery is done, can it be possible to introduce, you know, that without affecting the basic structure to force us to a referendum?
Okay, I'll come to you, Mr. Deuri, yes, please.
You know, there is one thing which is very important. We are where we are now on this dialogue committee because of the rallying calls by the head of ASMIO, Raila Amolo Odinga, and his brigade. It all revolves around changing our constitution to accommodate a few things. But you must also remember that Raila Amolo Odinga was at the heart of this constitution. He was the architect of the passage of this current constitution. We can forgive him because from the time that we promulgated this constitution is more time now. Maybe things have changed.
13 years.
But most importantly, when we are changing our laws, we should be guided by meritocracy, and we should do it by posterity, not doing it to achieve a certain political gain, because we can't keep on changing our constitution every time. Every year, after every election year, there are fresh demands that are called upon to do so. So I will hope that this time around, the head of SIMIO, Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga, after implementing what will come out of the dialogue committee, and even if his coalition or his party or himself loses elections again in 2027, he should not also come up with a raft of issues to be addressed, because he will be confirming that it actually is the problem. Our laws are not the problem. The second thing, which is very important, considering what my friend Dick Maungu said about these issues of tribalism, I usually avoid saying that we are employing many people from this tribe. I rather use region, because the reason as to why tribalism is entrenched and the people want to see their own in government is because of a feeling that you can only benefit if one of your own is there. And the people are given appointments not to serve their community, not to serve their family, but to serve Kenyans. So the only way to kill tribalism in this country and to bring inclusivity in this country is nothing more than any individual who has been given a position. You must serve every part of this country, every territory of this country, regardless of whether you come there or not. I have evidence that even in Baringo County, where Moi came from, it was the most undeveloped.
Okay. Would you, in that regard, calling for fairness in public service and delivery of services to the Kenyan people, then condemn the statements by the Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua, who said there are more Kenyans who have more shares than the others, describing Kenya as a shareholding company instead of what the Constitution prescribes as a sovereign state where all power belongs to the people of Kenya?
I would want to see a situation where after a financial year, you know, a report is done about how a particular minister has implemented programs across the country, how a particular government officer has implemented government programs across the country, and if it appears that he has implemented 70% of those programs from his community or from where he comes from, I think actions must be taken against that particular person. We must we must make Kenyans feel comfortable that regardless of who is the minister, service delivery will be available. Regardless of where this particular officer comes from, we will get services because we are all taxpayers. We contribute to the national kitty, national development, because you cannot accommodate all the 42 tribes in government.
Getting services, I'll come to Romango. Getting services is a right, not a privilege. Thank you for underscoring that. Just on the basis of that, because you talked about comfortability, Kenyans being in the comfort zone. I mean, hand on heart, are you comfortable with the statement, for example, Gachagua said?
You know, at times, depending on how one will want me to look at it, but because I've sat with Rigathi Gachagua, I understand the context upon which he made that statement. He never meant that if, for example, you are from Luo Nyanza, where we got least votes, then you not get development. He never meant that. You've seen government rolling even more developments in Homa Bay, where we got the least votes. So his statements was quoted out of context. He never meant that if you never voted for us, you were not going to be given an opportunity, development. What he said is that, and this I agree with him, is that you know, when you form government, you may want to assemble a team that shares in your vision, a team that understands your plan for the country. Yeah, people who share, who understands where you want to move the country to. Specifically on that pyramid of government appointments. So you may want to bring everybody that at least will be able to assist you. So that is what Rigathi Gachagua said in terms of a shareholding, but he never meant that the shareholding would extend to the regions within the territory of Kenya.
Thank you. Yes, I'll come to you.
Well, thank you so much. You know, when I hear my good friend and brother Didmas talk about that, I get chills, because when a person of the office of the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya goes into a podium and declares that Kenya is like a company where resources will be pegged on the number of shares you have, I wonder, in Luanda, where I come from, we have many Kenyans who pay taxes. These Kenyans have a right to be in government at whatever level. Therefore, when I talk about inclusivity, I don't mean that this tribe must be there. No. What I mean is that we must see the face of Kenya in the cabinet, because that is an economic resource as far as I'm concerned. It is a position where you actually determine a number of things in terms of, with regard to distribution of resources in this country. And therefore, by inclusivity, we want to see the face of Kenya. You know, for example, I come from Vihiga and a small constituency known as Rwanda. But I'll be very happy, for example. I know if we had a person from Rwanda in government, that person will not be serving the people of Rwanda. But the people of Rwanda will be very proud that at least we have one of our own, because he or she will be a taxpayer like another person. So when we talk about inclusivity, we are saying that let us see the face of Kenya in any other appointment that we have. Be it is senior appointment, that of at the cabinet level, be it is that at parastatal ambassadors, let us see the face of Kenya. Because when you have more than this, you know, it is a combination of several communities in this country. And therefore, every community has a right to be represented, because this is a national cake. And we cannot say that this cake can only be divided between two regions in this country. We are saying that this cake must be equally distributed, because we equally pay taxes. We equally toil every other day. And that's what I'm calling upon. And therefore, you know, the Deputy President has never ever retracted the statements of a shareholding in this company, in this country. He has never retracted. Here, my good friend trying to paraphrase or trying to sugarcoat it, but he has never retracted the same statement. How I wish that he was able to say that he was misquoted, but it was very clear, and that is a statement that has been repeated by many other of his brigade. And therefore, we are saying that we need to have inclusivity. And therefore, in this dialogue, I do believe and pray that out of that discussion, then let us see inclusivity. Secondly, it will be good to correct this, that, the person of Raila Amolo Odinga is not just another person. Raila Amolo Odinga has done great things in this country. And we believe, as Didmas has alluded to, many of the progressions we've seen or we've been able to acquire in terms of democratic space came courtesy of this great man. And therefore, we are not on that table because of Raila affair. We are on that table because of Wanjiko, the common man, the common hustler, whom my good friend will want to refer to as a hustler. We are on that table because of the hustler. Let this hustler be included, let this hustler be heard, and let this hustler be able to afford decent lifestyle, courtesy of what is happening.
Okay, and when you talk about inclusivity and the need for the one basket approach for all the Kenyan people in terms of service delivery and getting what they ought to be, that's their right, not a privilege, certainly, according to the Constitution.
Correct.
Because politicians in this country have been feeding from the same trough for the past nearly 60 years since independence, were you to form government in August, how different would your script be? Because the fear is that even if there would have been a change in the current administration or were the opposition, for example, to win power, still you will sing from the same hymn sheet. I mean, we would have seen otherwise people from other regions still forming a large bulk of the government. I mean, is this a call to sympathy from the opposition or a real reality to change the governance model in this country in terms of inclusivity that you're talking about?
Thank you. This is not a call for sympathy, but reality. In the last elections, so as to put this in context, it is good to note that Azimio had the majority in parliament. It's good to note that the current regime was able to raid members of parliament of Azimio and come into the Kenya Kwanza brigade. So to say that Azimio was well covered across the country. So our take was that had we formed government, I do believe that the blue, where we were and where we stand, could have actually had a very inclusive government whereby every other region in this country, far and wide, would have been included in this government. Thank you.
Okay. There is something very important. Before he gets away with it, before you get away with it.
Briefly, I'll get you. Let me get the account. Okay, yes, please.
He has said that Azimio was the majority in parliament when we just came in. What he has not confirmed to you is that there were majority on paper. There were coalition agreements that were disowned, that when these parties were meeting for tea and discussion on strategy on how to win elections, the names of the attendants were plaqued and appended to some coalition agreement that were not party to. It was on record when the speaker was ruling about some political parties, whether they were part of NASA or not, whether they were part of Azimio or not. So it is clear that when we came to the National Assembly, parties are free to associate, to join a coalition of their choice, and that's what that choice was made, and it became apparently clear that Kenya Kwanza coalition was the majority.
After buying?
Yeah, we never bought anybody. Were you available to be bought?
After buying.
It all comes down to integrity, yes, and I mean the leadership caliber that you need to portray. Yes, Mr. Wakili, we are at the Bomas of Kenya, certainly after again another electoral cycle. We were here 10 years ago on the edge following the ugly skirmishes that engulfed the country. I mean, what's the prompting factor, and how do you think this can be best addressed to end this uncertainty which accompanies our electoral cycle after every 5 years?
I think I would probably look at this in terms of the fact that we appear not to have a lot of confidence in the institutions that we have set up. And that is, in my view, primarily because most of these institutions tend, even when they are independent, still tend to take political instructions. And to that extent, then they become extremely compromised and are unable to deliver. And that creates the fear that there will be some element of exclusion from government. And that's why our position is that if we actually have fidelity to our constitution, we will resolve the problems that we have. You sit here and you listen to the politicians speak, and you can tell that they want to advance a political argument. And if they lost power, they would be on the other side advancing a contrary argument to what they are advancing today, because it's not a question of principle. But I want to say this. Who has the responsibility? All of us have a responsibility to uphold the Constitution. But the party that is in power has an even greater responsibility because they have sworn to uphold and protect that Constitution. So you have to ask yourself, how do you feel when you voted for the coalition or the party that lost?
Yeah.
And then the deputy president tells you that you are not even a shareholder.
You don't have shares.
You don't have shares in this government. How does it make you feel? Does it make you feel as if you are part of the same country? Because once the contest is over and the fat lady sings, politics should dissolve. The president becomes the president of everyone.
Okay.
And so therefore everyone should be entitled to get an opportunity in that, in the government. And it's not just development, it is any opportunity. Now when you hear that Parliament is questioning certain things, and then you are told that about 1,000 people are employed, and out of 1,000 people, about 40, 50, 60% of it came from 2 particular communities in this country, then you can bury your head in the sand as much as you want to.
Okay.
But the reality is that there is a problem. And how does that problem manifest? It manifests itself from the sentiments that have been made of shareholding. So who are the greatest shareholders? You see them in every appointment that is being made. What does the Constitution say? The Constitution says that in those appointments, not only merit, but also ethnic, the marginalized communities, diversity, youth, women, all those have to be reflected. So if we continue on this path, where once the executive comes in, it looks at the Constitution as an inconvenience on their part, and they say, no, we are only going to reward those who supported us to get into power. We will continue leaving a major segment of this country feeling isolated. And let me say this because this is perhaps my final shot as I'm leaving. The elections in this country, if they continue in the manner in which they have the pace, the runners-up will always be having about 48% or 47% or 48, around there, 49 point something percent of the vote. Because if you look at the past few trends, that maybe it may change. But that is where the problem is, first at a political level. So in terms of perhaps the system that happens in the other country, and this is my proposal, and I'm saying this because of what Mukwana had said, because you completely misunderstood me, is that it is a reality that when the leader, the political leader, who has garnered about 48% of the vote, is out of government in any way, or out of leadership in any way, because he's out of the system, that those voters who voted and believed in him would somehow feel disenfranchised. And so there's merit in what happens, like in the US, where you have a split, where you have the elections are split. They don't happen at the same time.
You stagger.
They are staggered. So that you are a senator, you vie. If you win, you become a president. If you don't, you continue running your term as a senator. And I think I made that proposal. I think he just didn't hear it. So it might be something that we would want to look at, because it might mean that we adopt a system where we stagger our elections. Is it something politicians would want to take? My chances are that it is something that highly unlikely to find palatable. Okay. But that is besides the point, because that is now the reality, and if we want to engage in that conversation, we'll engage in that conversation. The reality of it is this, that if we continue with this trend where once the president wins, he only looks at the segment that voted for him. Okay. in terms of giving them cabinet appointments, in terms of the opportunities that arise in his government for employment, then we will never have a statehood. We will always have, after every election, this feeling of exclusion.
Okay.
So it is incumbent upon the president to actually accept that he is the president of the entire country, and that once he becomes a father, he is not a father that has a favorite child. That all the children will get a square meal from.
Yes, Mukwanja. I mean, in response to that, the current architecture we gave ourselves, courtesy of Katiba 2010, 13 years later, I mean, we're still at Bomas talking about talks after the elections. Does our structure of governance address our very own political problems? Because we seem to be in perpetual continuity of uncertainty after every electoral cycle, and we seem not to be arriving at a solid conclusion. I
hear and agree with immense respect to the LSK president. My argument has revolved around whether the issue of introducing the new positions must require a plebiscite, or is there a different school of thought? But then he has his views. But I think we can benefit from the dialogue in and outside of Bomas by looking at these two. We gave ourselves a constitution, but we have largely lived within that constitution without constitutionalism. That's why we are largely struggling with the stringent provisions that the Constitution demands of us. To the extent that we are attempting to make changes without properly implementing. If you look at the question of the two-thirds gender rule, for instance, why has it just become very difficult for the political class, besides the Supreme Court advisory, to ensure it is implemented? It is because there is a deliberate political attempt to do so. If you look at why Article 177 is in the county assemblies, and being implemented, but not at the national and National Assembly and Senate level, you want to conclude that basically it is by design and not by default. So what we're asking of the political class is that they cannot continuously, as Honorable Didmas put it, make sure that it is always working to their favor. They have to be responsive enough to the constitutional provisions. And we cannot say we are not having challenges. 13 years after the implementation, we have to look back and ask, why are some things not working as expected? And incrementally make reforms to achieve that. That's why we're recommending that the president is held more accountable on critical issues, the socio-economic rights. Can we have the president, even including the funds, which are very popular with the elected leaders? And I'm sure if you ask these members of parliament, both of them will say, yes, CDF. Do Kenyans agree? Possibly yes, because of the impact. Okay. But can we tie these funds to particular functions? That, for instance, we do not have the CDFs going to, recurrent expenditure, but tie it to really national functions and Article 43, where it's about promoting and ensuring Kenyans' social and economic rights are realized. The World Fund, if it's to come, can it be tied to Schedule 4? Can we then strengthen, not just the post-mortem aspects of these funds, by having an audit that comes 2 years later and you cannot be able to get much out of that. We have had a lot of progress in terms of budgetary process, courtesy of a very strong parliamentary budget office. Can we have a parliamentary audit office to be able to support this? Can we strengthen the office of the Auditor General, so that then we are monitoring consistently and legislators have the necessary fodder to be able to to put everyone to account. And these are the issues that we are raising to ensure that we are improving our governance.
Thank you. Honorable Didmas, I'll give you the time. Let's first of all hear what Kenyans are saying. The hashtag is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya, and at Ayub Abdikadir here is what you are saying on the hashtag that is on X, formerly Twitter. The first one from Babu Michel K.E. I agree with Ekuro Koti said when he says that most constitutional amendments proposals to the bipartisan committee is for personal political gains. In fact, I even heard that the committee wanted huge sitting allowances. How far did they go on that? J.M. Musoma says will be in June, July at the highest point, at the height of the presidential campaigns in Kenya. We must be careful on matters electoral management, lest we give the world bad image of our great nation and ruin our global reputation. All eyes will be on us. Gode Barasawere says the creation of the office of the leader of opposition will cure a string of problems brought about by the need to wield power by the minority political wing in both houses of parliament. Sir Nixon Ndugure says, now that Singapore has featured prominently in Kenya's politics as a success story in reference to good governance, why not also benchmark with them about the office of official opposition leader, where Singapore is doing well? Evans Wanyelawan says, I strongly concur with Honorable Didmas that the formation of the office of the leader of opposition, because it will strengthen the oversight of the executive. It will also help in averting demonstrations. Magwas 3 says it's sad that these bipartisan talks have been turned into an avenue of discussing the interests of leaders and introducing BBI through the back door, which Ruto opposed. These talks are waste of the taxpayers' money. They are not to the benefit of the poor. Engineer Lazaro says the creation of the powerful official opposition leader's office to put government on check is logical and can be done through normal consensus minus calling for referendum. Others, I have never heard of any president being elected to settle in office for a whole year. And Bob Otieno Owino says bipartisan talks are just about politicians' interests creating positions for themselves, not caring about Wanjiku. At this time, when high cost of living is out of hand and skyrocketing fuel prices are no longer their main agenda on the table. Ole Shonko says these bipartisan talks have nothing to do with the Wanjikus. It's only costing the taxpayers more money. The end product will be more cost to Kenyans. So far, nothing to do with reducing the cost of living. Okelo Mwalimu says, as we celebrate CAF's decision to give green light to the East African countries to host the AFCON 2027, we must urge FKF to clean up the mess witnessed in the management of the beautiful game, i.e. by paying Coach Firat his salary arrears. Such mistakes may attract harsh penalty from the world governing body, FIFA. Peter Gesura says, 89 says, we appreciate the efforts made to ensure we host AFCON 2027, that's the Africa Cup of Nations, as this will boost the economy. We urge the government through the Minister of Sports to work tirelessly to ensure that our stadia meets the international standards. Thanks for your feedback, and yes, you had a point, Honorable Didmas.
I was saying, if you listen to the issues that are being discussed at the Dialogue Committee, if you listen to the ASMIO leader, most of the issues that he talks about being the problem that Kenya faces, those issues were extensively discussed during the process that led to the promulgation of our new constitution. The issues to do with the inclusivity, tribalism, and during the promulgation of the new constitution, yes, they anchored in various commissions that will provide the cure to those problems. It is saddening to see that today, after more than 10 years, more than 12 years, we are still discussing the same issues. Maybe time has come where we can put those commissions on the table, look at the Gender and Equality Commission, look at the Cohesion Commission, and find out if have they achieved, have they provided the cure that Kenyans wanted? What are they supposed to do to ensure that people should not be appointed for one particular region? What are they supposed to do? Do they lack the requisite teeth to bite? So can we give them teeth to bite? because we cannot be discussing about issues of inclusivity, and we have good commissions that are supposed to ensure that everybody is included in the affairs of public service delivery. It's high time that we look at the deliverables of these very many commissions, whether they have achieved the intended purposes or not.
Okay. Yes, I'll come to you, Mongo, for the final remarks. Yes, Franklin Mukwanja. I mean, have institutions that are independent, the vast array of them, courtesy of Katiba, lived up to the expectations that Kenyans had in giving them the green light?
We have done ourselves a disservice, and we need to pull up our socks, and we need to improve. We have seen potential, but I think we need to make progress. There are offices that are doing their job. There are offices that are constrained out of political interference. And we need to look at not just the change of personnel, for instance, in IEBC, but how do we address the twin problem of the independence of the Commission, as well as the trust deficit in the Commission. What are those new tweaks that we need to have so that such officers can be able to do their job? What new thing can we do with the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties so that we can ensure that the regulation and management of political parties is improved, so that there is a better performance of individual political parties, there is intra-party democracy, to ensure that multi-party democracy is maturing. And these are the questions we need to ask ourselves. In conclusion, we are not in a place for a constitutional overhaul. Let us consider incremental reforms so that we can be able to improve and strengthen the institutions that can implement this constitution much better.
Thank you. Yes, Honorable Mongo.
Thank you so much. Somebody once said that if it looks like a duck, walks like one, and quacks like one, then it is most likely a duck. I say this with regard to what Senator for Nandi, Honorable Cherargei, took before this committee, that we need to increase the presidential term limit from 5 to 7. That should send us in fear, because that is how dictatorships are done. Cherargei does not just speak for himself, but I believe he's a puppet for, I don't know who, maybe Didymus could help us understand.
But, do you agree with the proposal to increase the time?
But that is an area that we should watch.
Let him finish.
I don't agree, and UDA as a party, we have issued a position. That position is for Cherargei himself. We are not in support, and because this dialogue committee had opened floodgates for anybody to send their views there. Those are his own personal views that should not be attributed to mean that that is the position of the government or the position of His Excellency William Samoei Ruto.
Thank you.
We are not interested in extending.
Yes, let me finish up, please, briefly.
Thank you. Others, thank you so much for hosting us. And I believe that this dialogue committee will be able to sort these issues once and for all, because constitutions are made for the people and not the people for the constitutions.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Your time is well appreciated. Dick Maungo is the lawmaker representing Luanda constituency. Your time is appreciated. And to you too, the Executive Director, the Center for Multi-Party Democracy, Franklin Mukwanja. Thank you for your time, much appreciated. Didmas Barasa, the lawmaker representing Kimilili constituency. Earlier on, we had the Law Society of Kenya President Eric Deuri, who was here to give as well his account of the developments in the country here on the state of the nation. And thank you to you too for waking up with us here on the broadcast and sending in your contributions, and we sample them because we cherish your presence here on Daybreak. We'll see you tomorrow morning here at the same time. Good morning.